There's a list of fines of $250 if you don't ask for a napkin and then are given one. And they're saying, well, then we're not going to enforce that because it would be pretty tough to go to this poor mom and pop shop and find them. But if you're not going to enforce it, then what's the point of having it in the first place?
Adam Soos here for Rebel, and he was very happy to now be joined by City Councillor for Ward 13, Dan McLean. He was one of the councillors who effectively led the charge against the single-use bylaw that saw people paying more, businesses caught up in all this sort of bureaucracy, all in the name of purportedly, at least, environmentalism. I guess my first question for you is sort of, where did this come from? Who asked for it? What was the motivation behind this bylaw?
Well, this came up quite some time ago, and I opposed it vigorously back then because I didn't think it made any sense. It was going to cost people money. It was going to be inefficient. It was going to be unsanitary. It was ideology over common sense. So when it got brought back, I think the rumblings in City Hall, the administration, and the mayor knew that we were going to probably be bringing forth a motion to repeal it or make changes. So they thought they could maybe possibly preempt that by bringing it as a discussion. I don't think they would have predicted that we would have defeated it and won and had it repealed.
Well, I want to talk about sort of the unexpected nature of that. But first, when this was being sort of developed, was there any public consultation? I mean, this was immediately wildly unpopular. Was the public consulted at all before this was implemented?
No, like a lot of things here at City Hall, there's not enough public consultations. We're not listening to the people. Right. And the people are waking up, and that's why this is probably the most unpopular council in history, more unpopular than this city bylaw.
Yeah, it's shocking. We were seeing some support polls from Mayor Gondek under 30%. I think it's unprecedented in Calgary. Calgary folks are usually pretty happy, so you have to do something or a few things to have them that upset. Now, this is interesting because it comes in the wake of the federal plastics ban, which labeled all plastics as toxic, being deemed unreasonable and unconstitutional. Was there any discussion among City Council, despite there being distinctions in the law, that some of the same logic on that federal ruling might apply?
They use that as a precedence, as a reason for a lot of the portions of this bylaw. Mm-hmm. The Supreme Court has said it's unconstitutional, but it's being appealed. So again, the city will not actually recognize that right now. So it's a mute argument. Mm-hmm. But beyond that, let's just use some common sense. Again, it's ridiculous.
Yeah. You know, some of the concerns, and let's talk about sort of the common sense issues. On Twitter, you effectively talked about how this is ineffective, inconvenient, and then unsanitary. Let's talk about what's ineffective about it.
Well, there's a lot of retailers that don't even want to charge it, number one, because some of their staff are getting harassed or want to quit. So that's not happening. The other part is there's a list of fines of $250 if you don't ask for a napkin and then are given one. And they're saying, well, then we're not going to enforce that because it would be pretty tough to go to this poor mom and pop shop and find them. But if you're not going to enforce it, then what's the point of having it in the first place? So again, stupid.
Yeah. Now, and the other consideration is, let's say folks are completely on board with this environmental stuff. They've already gone full biodegradable. They've invested. They've bought in some of the co-op biodegradable bags. They've got back stock. Was there any consideration given to the sort of costs that businesses are incurring for implementing this program?
Yes and no. A compostable bag from co-op, I use that argument. We have technologies that are in place right now so that you would not have to implement this bylaw. But the other side of the coin is the retailers are also collecting all these funds. It doesn't go to the city. Yeah. So it's like an extra tax on the public, goes into the, if you're a Walmart store, studies have shown in other places where this has been implemented, like $200,000 per store that they're collecting in fees on bags. Mm-hmm. And that, again, that's just, so it's a plus and minus. And it just doesn't make any sense.
Well, and that could easily be left to the individual, the stores, to decide if it is such a cumbersome cost. I think lots of people out there, your business, someone comes in, supports your business. You'd rather just give them a bag for all the support they've brought into your business. I wanted to ask you, and I read some of the details about some of the sort of policies to reuse takeout containers. Is that what you're talking about with the sort of unsanitary concerns?
Well, not only that, just say you take your bag, that you have to use dozens, what studies differ, to actually make it more environmentally friendly than a plastic bag. But say I take my bag, I put my McDonald's in 5 times already, then I hand it back to the drive-through person to then put their food back into it. I mean, this is just, did we not learn anything from COVID that, you would have think that there's just too many people. There's flies bouncing around in baskets and stuff. It's not sanitary.
Now, why is this a priority right now? People are struggling to pay their bills, and it seems like a lot of resources are being allocated. Not only allocated to this, but the fact you now, a senior living on a pension goes to buy their groceries, they need to budget for bags too.
Yeah, it's just that ideology. Some will call it woke, some will call it far left, but it's an agenda that just keeps pushing against common sense, what the common person wants, what the reasonable person wants. And so I think people are starting to push back. They're opening their eyes and saying, enough. Government is not here to tell me what to do.
One of my questions, and you've used the words here leading up to it, is there's sort of a divide on council, and it is common sense versus sort of woke. But even though this bylaw was so universally maligned, the vote to see it repealed only squeaked by 8-7. Why is that? Why is it, despite this massive backlash, that it was so close?
I think they get the same emails, they get the same backlash. They know they're very unpopular, but I guess in politics, they're thinking maybe in the last year up to the election, they might pass a budget with a zero tax increase or throw out a bunch of goodies, and they're somehow going to get reelected because there'll be a vote split, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. But again, go out and talk to the people. Get yourself out of this echo chamber inside City Hall, and then, yeah.
Who are some of the folks who sort of crossed the floor, so to speak, on this issue? Clearly, people had to vote this in. Who sort of changed their minds and came over to common sense?
Well, there's some terms floating around, the hateful eight and the sensible six. That was 4 or 5 or 6, so it's growing. Yeah. But I think there's a few, like Evan Spencer came over, which usually doesn't vote with us, but he represents a very conservative riding in the deep southeast, and I think he listened to his residents and changed his vote. And the same with Raj Dhaliwal, he's up in the northeast, and a lot of people there are facing affordability challenges and don't want to keep paying $1, $2. $3, it all adds up.
Right. Why do Calgarians have to wait so long? I understand it took a while to come into effect, but for Calgarians, this came into effect. People were very upset. Now it's looking like it's going to be May or spring. Or what's the timeline, and why is it taking so long for this to go away?
So underneath the municipal charter, before a bylaw is enacted, it has to have a public hearing. And so to repeal it, it also has to go through a public hearing. So administration has to set that up. Then we'll have the public hearing. It'll be spring. The sooner the better. We all would have loved to have NAF for a goddamn napkin, if I can use that word. We're paying 15 cents right now. But they're going to have to go through that process. But I feel confident that that'll be repealed, and then we'll see what happens after that.
And is there any potential for maybe unofficial non-enforcement or sort of laying back, given that this is so unpopular and we know it's likely to be repealed?
There's already enough restaurants that just kind of, here's a bag, I don't want to charge you. I think you'll see more of that.
Now, we talked at the start of this interview about how Mayor G.O.T. Gondek and this council is wildly unpopular, following similar trends to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, where they're married to these ideologies. They push them no matter what, even when the polls and the people they're supposed to be representing push back. Is Mayor G.O.T. Gondek more interested in pushing ideologies than enacting representative democracy?
Well, that's a trap. I don't know. I can't speak for what she's thinking. Yeah. I'm hopeful that some of this ideology and the pushback from the public on certain councillors and the mayor sink in a bit, and then they start going forward or do some more common sense, more sensible policies.
I suppose a question that's a little bit off topic for you, but we've talked quite a bit about how people are struggling out there. In the meantime, we've seen 7 to 8 to 9% property tax increase, as well as raises for councillors. What's your opinion on sort of the optics of that?
Oh, it's terrible. On the pay raise, when I first got elected, I put forth a motion to freeze wages going forward. Soundly rejected and trashed immediately. I regret I could have brought forth a last-minute motion onto the floor to repeal. It would have lost, but I still should have tried just to show that people that where they stood on that. But in a time where everybody else is tightening their belt, I think we should, as leaders, tighten our belt as well.
Well, I want to thank you so much for your time. I also do want to extend an invitation to Mayor G.O.T. Gondek. Lots of these ideas being pushed. I'm very open to a fair, impartial interview with some tough questions. And if you believe that these ideals are ideals that should be continued, these bylaws should be defended, come share those opinions with us. I want to thank Councillor Dan McLean for taking time, for answering questions, being willing to be in the hot seat. I really appreciate it. And for everyone at home, I want to thank you so much for tuning in. For Rebel News, I'm Adam Soos. Hey guys, if you consider yourself among the many Canadians who can no longer afford to pay for these woke, ideologically driven green initiatives, go sign our petition at nogreenreset.com.